Hey guys, let's talk firearm safety. The reason we have firearm safety rules is because if you fail to follow those, it could result in injury or death to yourself or others. Now, before you purchase a firearm and introduce it to your home, I highly recommend that you get formal training. I know a lot of people get excited and they go to the gun store and they just buy a gun and bring it home, and they don't know what the rules of safety are. And if you've done that, this will be your formal training for firearm safety. So let's get started. Rule number 1, treat every firearm as if it's loaded. And that applies to any firearm, rifle, pistol, shotgun, etc. If you have a semi-automatic, you remove the magazine, rack the slide a few times to verify that it is unloaded, and keep the slide pulled back. And never hand a firearm to someone unless you've checked and made sure it's clear. And it doesn't matter that the firearm is in your home and you know it's unloaded. Get into the habit of making sure every gun is unloaded. If you have a revolver, you open it up, dump out the cartridges, leave the cylinder open, and you hand it to them this way. Again, you never hand a firearm to someone unless you visually inspected it. Rule number 2, always keep the gun pointed in the safe direction. Now, what does that mean? Basically comes down to don't point your firearm at anything you're not willing to destroy. It's that simple. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means you need to actually have your sight picture first, because you don't take the shot until you have a sight picture. So you keep your finger off the trigger until you have your sight picture and you're ready to shoot. And rule number 4 is know your target and what's beyond. And that's a little tricky because you don't always know what's beyond your target. When you're at a gun range, you know what's beyond your target. They have a backstop. You could be hunting and you see a deer and you don't know what's beyond the deer. Or you could live in an apartment building and you have an intruder and he's standing in front of a sheetrock wall. Well, you don't know if there are people behind that wall. So you need to be very, very careful before you take that shot because you own every bullet that leaves that muzzle. So make sure you know your target and what's beyond. The next thing we're going to talk about are discharges. And discharges can also be very dangerous. They can cause serious injury or death to others. And they fall into 2 categories. You have an accidental discharge and you have a negligent discharge. And there's a huge difference between 2 of them. The accidental discharge is a mechanical failure of your firearm. Could be a broken spring, and it causes the firearm to go off. And that is something that is not a user error and can't always be avoided. The second is the negligent discharge, and that is a user error, typically because the user didn't check and make sure the firearm was clear, the gun was loaded and they had their finger on the trigger and the gun fired. And if you did not follow the rules of gun safety and you didn't check that your firearm was loaded and you had your finger on the trigger and you went to hand your gun to someone or you were showing it to someone and it went off, even though you didn't mean to shoot them, that is not an accident. That is a negligent discharge. And there's a huge distinction, especially when you're in court. The next thing we're going to talk about are cartridge malfunctions. And there are 3 of those. There is a misfire, a hang fire, and a squib. We'll start off first with the misfire. The misfire is you pull the trigger and you hear click. And it doesn't fire. Don't panic. Put the gun down, keep it pointed in a safe direction, wait 30 seconds, and clear the firearm. Next, you have a hang fire. And a hang fire kind of looks like a misfire at first because you'll pull the trigger and you'll hear a click, and it may take milliseconds or a few seconds, and then you'll hear the bang. And the same thing applies. When you hear the click and no bang, put the gun down in the safe direction, wait 30 seconds, clear the firearm. The third is a squib. And the squib is basically because there's not enough pressure or velocity, and either the bullet leaves the muzzle and it travels in a spiral motion, or it wobbles, or it doesn't leave the muzzle with as much velocity as it should, or worse, it gets stuck in the barrel. And if that is the case, you clear the firearm and you take it to a gunsmith. I would also recommend, if you have that happen, you remove the barrel, if you have a semi-automatic, clear the firearm, remove the barrel, and either use a light or a brass cleaning rod to verify that there is a bullet stuck in the barrel. And if it's a revolver, you do the same thing. You open it up, use a cleaning rod or a bore light, and if that's the case, you take it to a gunsmith. I wouldn't recommend trying to just bang it out yourself. And if there is a range safety officer, make him aware of it. Now, in any of those conditions, I would highly recommend you call a ceasefire. And anyone at the gun range could call a ceasefire. And that's one of the things that makes your training safe, and you keep others safe. Next thing I want to talk about is storage. Every gun owner should have a gun safe, whether it's a full standing gun safe or a small one you keep on your nightstand. And basically the reason for the gun safe is so that unauthorized persons don't have access to your firearm. What are unauthorized persons? Could be minors, someone in your home that may have a felony, or somebody in your home that's under the influence. At minimum, you should have a cabinet with a lock on it. I prefer a normal standing gun safe. But the bottom line is, you shouldn't leave firearms laying around your home, especially if they're loaded, that anybody can get to. The last thing I want to talk about is ammunition. When you purchase a firearm, it's very important you use the proper ammunition. And there's 3 ways you can check to make sure the ammunition you have is the proper ammunition for your firearm. It will normally be stamped on your firearm itself. It may say 9mm or 38 special. It will also be on the stamping on the case. It will also say the caliber. And it'll also be on the label of the box of ammunition. Now, one thing to note is that if you go out and buy a 38 special and you buy 38 plus P ammo, if it does not say 38 plus P, do not use that ammunition. Now, if you have a .357 Magnum, you can use 38 special or 38 special plus P. Same thing applies to rifles and shotguns. In a rifle, for instance, if you have a rifle that is .223 and .223 is stamped on it, that is all you can use. You cannot use .556 ammo on a .223. However, if you buy a .556, you can use .223 or .556 ammo. So I'm hoping that if you haven't had formal training, this was helpful to you. Whether you're a new gun owner or a future gun owner or an experienced gun owner, firearm safety is very, very important. It can prevent serious injury or death to others. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. Thanks for watching.